Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something, well, pretty audacious. We are tackling this colossal stack of sources. I mean, it spans millennia, different disciplines. We're going from ancient Greek political philosophy, Eastern spiritual texts,
Yeah.
all the way through military strategy like Sun Tzu, right up to, modern organizational theory. Stuff powering places like Pixar.
It really is quite the collection, a masterclass in synthesis, you could say. And our mission really is to try and distill the core principles, what determines enduring success, whether that's for, an individual person or an entire state. We're trying to connect the dots between how someone builds that internal integrity, the self, and how effective leaders navigate the external structures, armies, organizations, political systems, you name it.
Right.
We're trying to distill that core calculus, the thing that links virtue, power, and practical wisdom across all this time. That's the challenge, isn't it? Bridging that inner world of character with the external reality of command. So let's dive in. Let's unpack this by starting exactly where, I guess, all power begins, the inner foundation. Okay, so when we talk about effectiveness, you almost have to start with character, right? With the foundations laid down by someone like Aristotle. Our sources remind us that these virtues of character, things like courage, temperance, justice, they directly determine how you even conceive of happiness. But there's a great nuance here. Aristotle notes that the perfect, the unqualified realization of virtue, that only exists in the best constitution.
Right. And that phrase, best constitution, it really demands a closer look, especially for you, the listener, operating in the world today. It implies that virtue isn't something you achieve in a vacuum, like in a lab of pure thought.
Yeah.
External conditions matter. Political conditions, social conditions, they matter deeply for its true internal realization. So if you're a citizen trying to build integrity, but you're in a system that's, let's say, demonstrably flawed.
The virtues you develop might suit that environment. They might let you be a good neighbor, for instance. But they won't give you that unqualified happiness or perfect practical wisdom Aristotle talks about.
So it's an acknowledgement that the structure of society, it either facilitates or, frustrates our highest potential.
Precisely. The environment shapes the expression of virtue.
So virtue is necessary, definitely, but the environment determines how fully it can flower. And building on that tradition, Cicero gives us this wonderfully structured way of defining what is right. He divides it into 4 core pillars.
Yeah.
It sounds less like abstract philosophy and more like a detailed spec sheet for developing a balanced leader.
That's a good way to put it. The first pillar is about perception and the skillful treatment of truth. Basically, prudence or practical wisdom.
Right, the intellectual side.
Exactly, seeing the world clearly. Then the second pillar is the social dimension, maintaining good fellowship and justice. This means, giving everyone their due, rigorously keeping faith, keeping your promises. That's the cornerstone of trust in any relationship or organization, really.
Then we shift inward to the self.
We do. The third pillar focuses on that internal engine, the greatness and strength of a lofty and unconquered mind. This speaks to resilience, courage, true mental fortitude, the ability to face adversity without just breaking. And finally, the fourth pillar demands structure, order, measure, and temperance. Moderation in all actions. And Cicero's really insistent here. These 4 aren't optional extras, they're intertwined. They make up a sound character.
And this leads right into Cicero's core insight on ethics and expediency, which, if you look at modern business or politics today, it seems profoundly challenging to uphold this idea.
It really does.
He argues that what is truly right must also be expedient. And conversely, nothing expedient can possibly be unjust.
It's an absolute moral mandate. It really forces you to question your assumptions about success. Cicero warns that the opinion that divorces what is right from what is expedient. He calls that the most prolific source of evil.
Wow.
Think about that. If a shortcut seems beneficial, seems useful, maybe it increases profit quickly or political gain, but it requires injustice. Cicero says it cannot be truly right or truly expedient in the long run.
So the evil comes from thinking you can trade long-term good, like justice, for short-term gain.
Exactly. That separation, he suggests, inevitably leads to ruin for the individual, for the organization. The wise person understands that integrity isn't just nice, it's the only sustainable strategy. #tire be self-control and the path to true knowledge.
That focus on inner integrity, inner wisdom, It leads us straight into the realm of spiritual and psychological mastery.
Yeah.
The Bhagavad Gita, for instance, gives us this incredibly specific vocabulary for the self-realized individual. It introduces the Diya and the Goswami.
The Dhira is sort of the philosophical ideal, right? The most sober man, someone who has perfect knowledge of the individual soul, the super soul, and material nature. They're never deluded by the change of bodies, the transient nature of the world. It's a state of perfect, unwavering philosophical knowledge.
Okay, that's the ideal. But the Goswami, or Swami, that gives us the actionable part for daily life.
Yeah.
The part required to reach that state.
Exactly. This is the person who achieves self-mastery by, and this is key, tolerating the urges of the material senses, checking the force of desire and anger.
Tolerating, not eliminating.
Tolerating and checking, managing them. And the rigor of this control is fascinating because the sources list these forces explicitly. It's the urges of talk, anger, mind, stomach, genitals, and tongue. Being able to control these 6 drivers is presented as the key to happiness and self-realization, even while living in the material world.
That's quite a list.
It is. Consider the discipline involved. Managing the force of the tongue, that means control over what you eat, yes, but also what gossip or cruel words you let yourself speak. Controlling the stomach means restraint against greed, against gluttony. It's a holistic, very practical application of self-control. It's seen as essential for genuine progress towards that philosophical ideal. You have to conquer your own immediate physical demands before you can really command others or even truly command yourself.
Psychologically, this seems to mirror some of Maslow's work, doesn't it? Particularly around motivation. He distinguished between people driven by lack and those striving for growth.
Exactly. A very strong parallel. Most people, Maslow argued, operate under deficiency motivation. They're striving to gratify basic needs. They feel they lack security, love, respect. They're driven by a hole they need to fill.
Okay.
But Maslow proposed a different psychology for self-actualizing people. He called it growth motivation or meta-motivation. The drive isn't about filling a lack. It's the drive to grow towards perfection. It's characterized by continuous character development, expression, maturation. They're motivated not by what they don't have, but by what they could be.
That distinction is profound, actually. It suggests that if your ambition is purely to fill a deficit, get money because you lack security, you're kind of stuck in deficiency motivation.
Right.
But if your ambition is the pure expression of capability, the drive to create or lead perfectly, that's growth motivation.
And that inner development, it naturally translates outward, which is what Emerson captured so perfectly with his concept of self-reliant.
Ah, yes.
Emerson observed that strong will is always in fashion. It requires composure, self-contentment, good sense and character, he said, make their own forms every moment. So if you achieve that inner mastery, that Goswami level of control, you're not trying to fit into external formulas or follow fleeting trends. Your character itself dictates appropriate original behavior. And that earns trust far more reliably than any manufactured persona. You become the definition of authenticity, and that's what gives you your external force. ###C.
The challenge of perception and instinct. Okay, so we've built this inner foundation. Character, self-control. But then we move into communication, and we hit this massive wall. Perception. We might have the best character in the world, but if our worldview is flawed, our actions will be flawed too.
Absolutely.
Stephen Covey uses that classic perception demonstration. The image that can be seen as either a young woman or an old hag.
Yes, a powerful illustration.
He uses that to explain how conditioning molds our paradigms, our fundamental way of seeing things.
That demonstration is just essential because it shows how profoundly conditioning affects our worldview and therefore our behavior. If just 10 seconds of looking at an image can set your frame of reference, imagine the impact of a lifetime of influences: family, school, society.
Right.
Covey stresses you cannot act with true integrity outside of how you see the world. If you try to change only your outward attitudes and behaviors, what he calls the personality ethic.
Yeah, the surface stuff.
Exactly. It will inevitably fail if you haven't first examined the basic paradigms, the maps in your head from which those attitudes flow. Trying to act nice while secretly judging others. He says it's like painting a rotting fence. Looks good for a day, maybe, but the foundation is compromised.
But sometimes we don't even get to the point of rational paradigms, do we? Because our brain just skips the reasoning queue entirely, especially in high-stakes, stressful situations. This is where Daniel Goleman's work on the amygdala comes in. It gives us a neurological explanation for why we make bad decisions under pressure.
Yes, the emotional hijack. When a conversation turns crucial, or when organizational stakes are really high, our human instinct favors that primitive response, fight or flight. Same way we react to a physical threat.
Okay.
The amygdala, our sort of emotional sentinel, it has an emergency route. Information can speed directly from the ear to the thalamus to the amygdala. It actually bypasses the slower, more informed analysis of the neocortex.
So it reacts before it fully thinks.
Pretty much. And this explains that painful irony, doesn't it? Why, when success or relationship stability matters most, we often launch into an emotional reactive defense. We perform our worst just when we need to be at our best. We default to blaming, attacking, or just shutting down.
So the crucial skill, then, is somehow slowing down that instinctual leap, that jump from observation to judgment. The crucial conversations authors get at this by focusing rigorously on facts.
Yes. The primary skill in difficult dialogue is doing the, let's call it, homework of gathering facts. But critically, and this is the key part, acknowledging that you are sharing your facts, what you have seen and heard.
Not claiming to have all the facts.
Exactly. Not pretending you have the monopoly on truth. By grounding the conversation in specific observations like, I saw the report was delivered 2 days late and that resulted in X. Rather than judgment, you are irresponsible and lazy. You create space. Space for the other person's facts, their experiences, their perspective. This neutral, factual approach helps overcome that judgment-driven fight-or-flight response. It allows genuine dialogue to actually begin.
It's like the practical modern application of that philosophical virtue of prudence we talked about earlier, seeing clearly first.
Precisely.
Okay, so
Right.
now we take this ideally highly developed inner character mastery of perception, self-control, and we plunge it into the messy world of power and external governance.
Yeah, where things get complicated.
This historical analysis, it often starts with political theory trying to define the sovereign,
Yeah.
the ultimate source of authority. Hobbes, in Leviathan, he views the sovereign as a fictional, an artificial person.
Hobbes was grappling with the ultimate problem, chaos, the state of nature. In the absence of any natural order everyone agrees on, he needed a mechanism for unity. For him, the unity of the Commonwealth doesn't come from the scattered individuals being represented. It comes from the unity of the representer, the sovereign itself. This artificial person, this persona moralis, the Leviathan, it's the only thing that stands between us and the war of all against all. Since there's no objective moral right we all agree on, the sovereign is invented to declare what shall be right for us. It creates the social contract and order, fundamentally, through fear of punishment.
Rousseau then took that concept of the sovereign and, well, refined it quite a bit. He drew a sharp, critical distinction between the sovereign and the government itself. This distinction feels incredibly relevant even to modern constitutional debates.
Oh, absolutely. For Rousseau, the sovereign is the collective populace, the people acting in their lawmaking capacity, expressing what he called the general will. And crucially, this entity, the sovereign people, cannot be represented. Law, for him, is just the declaration of what the collective wants. It can't be delegated.
Okay, so the people make the law directly.
In theory, yes. The government, or the prince as he sometimes called it, that's the executive power. That's the force applied to implementing the law. And that executive power can and should be represented, delegated.
Ah, I see the distinction.
But the structure is inherently fragile because if the government's particular will, its own self-interest, or the interest of the governing class becomes more active, more powerful than the general will of the populace,
Then you have a problem.
then the social union dissolves. You effectively get two opposing sovereigns, the people and the government acting for itself. And that, for Rousseau, is the moment revolution becomes inevitable.
And if that structure breaks down entirely, if the government betrays its trust, John Locke provides the ultimate, maybe the most radical check on power. The people's right to appeal to heaven. That sounds dramatic. What does it mean practically?
It is dramatic, but it's the final recourse. This happens when the rulers, whether it's the executive or the legislature, try to enslave or destroy the people. When they exercise power without legal or moral right.
Right.
Locke argues that the people have reserved an ultimate determination to themselves. It's by a law that's antecedent. It comes before and is paramount to all positive written laws of men. They, the people, are the final judges of whether the government has forfeited its trust.
Doesn't that lead to constant instability?
Locke argued no, actually, because this right only really operates when the inconvenience, the oppression, is so great that the majority feels it, is weary of it, and sees no other option. It's meant to be a necessary, albeit potentially violent, constitutional reset button. Hashtag be leadership through discipline and leverage.
Okay, so these ancient thinkers give us the philosophy of power. But historical leaders show us the practical application. Cyrus, as detailed in the Cyropedia, seems like a master of using his own presence to be a living law.
Yes, Cyrus really understood that authority stems from credibility, from modeled behavior. His methods for maintaining order were very behavioral, very clear. He deliberately deferred judgment sometimes to teach his officers patience, and he used a crystal clear system of rewards and punishments. Well, assigning the lightest and most profitable tasks to the punctual, the reliable ones, and depriving truants of possessions, giving those possessions to the serviceable. Very direct consequences. By setting himself up as a living law with eyes that see, he embodied the high standards he expected. His subjects, his followers, they copied his diligence and service. Not just because they feared punishment, but because they saw the reward in his own conduct. He led by example.
That's classical moral leadership, isn't it? But then if we move from Cyrus to Machiavelli, well, the ethical calculus gets a lot darker. It moves into this realm of necessary immorality.
Machiavelli provided the cold, pragmatic assessment for survival, especially for a new prince trying to establish power. He advised that a prince wishing to hold his own must know how to do wrong, but importantly, according to necessity.
According to necessity.
The critical distinction is that the ruler should be prudent enough to avoid vices that would cost him the state, vices that would make him hated or despised. But if necessary, he may abandon himself to them. So, if a state can only be saved with difficulty, incurring reproach for certain vices like being seen as stingy rather than overly generous, which might bankrupt him, that might be the expedient action.
So it's not about being evil for its own sake.
Not at all. For Machiavelli, the highest virtue of the prince is preserving the state, maintaining order. Even if it requires temporary, calculated immorality, it's realism, albeit a harsh one.
And this ability to leverage structural power for personal ends, maybe operating outside the public view, that's perfectly exemplified in modern times by someone like Robert Moses, the power broker of New York.
Oh, Moses was a genius at leveraging institutional structure, an absolute master. He perfected the use of the public authority institution.
What did that let him do?
It allowed him to control massive budgets and exercise staggering autonomy with very little transparency, very little democratic oversight. And the sources say he used this authority specifically to keep the public from finding out what he was doing until his projects were basically fate's accomplice, already built or underway.
Wow.
His political power wasn't just maintained through big projects, but through what was dubbed honest graft, doling out personal favors, contracts, sugar plums to political insiders. He built this vast network of personal loyalty rather than ideological commitment. People owed him.
And the dark side of that leverage was his infamous use of files, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which brings the Machiavellian calculus right into the 20th century.
Absolutely. The warning was explicit. People knew Moses would use these detailed records of personal favors he'd granted to opponents, the literal files, to destroy them if they ever crossed him. Yeah, Mayor Wagner apparently once warned a younger colleague, never let Moses do anything personal for you, because eventually he will reach back in his file and throw this in your face. Publicly otherwise, and if he has to, he will destroy you with it.
Sure.
It illustrates a powerful leader leveraging not just institutional structure, but the weaknesses, the past favors, the vulnerabilities of individuals to maintain absolute control. A very potent tool. #C. Navigating ethical dilemmas and conflicting loyalties.
The ruthless expediency of someone like Moses stands in such stark contrast to Cicero's definition of right. It really forces you to ask,
Right.
should integrity matter if the results seem good, if the bridges get built?
Cicero's position is just uncompromising on this because he focused on the internal degradation caused by injustice, regardless of the external outcome. He said nothing unjust can be truly expedient or serviceable. He offers that famous example, doesn't he? The good man who wouldn't snap his fingers to sneak his name into a rich man's will, even if secrecy was absolutely guaranteed.
Right, why not? No one would know.
Because the moral standard is internal. The action itself is a violation of character, regardless of whether he gets caught or gains from it. That internal standard of justice overrides any external opportunity for gain. For Cicero, that's non-negotiable.
A completely different model of leadership, then. one focused entirely on moral example rather than coercion or manipulation, is provided by Confucius.
Yes, Confucius believed that effective governance requires moral gravity from the leader, not killing, not punitive enforcement as the primary tool. When Jikamzi asked him about governing, effectively, specifically about killing those who have abandoned the way to attract those who are on it,
Okay.
Confucius replied that if the leader governs effectively, there's simply no need for killing. He used that unforgettable analogy. The excellence of the exemplary person, Junzi, is like the wind. The petty person is like the grass.
Ah, the wind in the grass.
As the wind blows, the grass is sure to bend. Moral authority, genuine virtue in the leader, naturally shapes behavior without needing force. The leader's internal character determines the culture. It just flows outwards.
That's the ideal of governance, certainly. But the sources also provide a painful counterexample. When moral authority is entirely corrupted, undermining any sense of integrity in leadership, as Frederick Douglass detailed, when religion becomes a cover for evil.
Douglas's assertion is incredibly powerful. He said that religious slaveholders were the worst of all, and his reasoning cuts right to the heart of hypocrisy. Religion, when practiced by slaveholders, served as, in his words, a mere covering for the most horrid crimes. It provided protection, even a kind of sanctification, for the most infernal deeds.
So it gave them permission, almost.
It gave them a shield. When an ideology, even a spiritual or ethical one, is co-opted to justify barbarity, it becomes a perfect shield for the cruelest and most cowardly behavior. Because it removes shame, it provides institutional defense against criticism. It highlights that terrible danger of external observance completely replacing internal virtue.
Okay, moving towards organizational success and survival now, we naturally transition into strategy. Starting with Sun Tzu's clear preference for rapid victory over prolonged conflict.
Yes, Sun Tzu stresses that the great object of war, and you can easily extend this to any competitive endeavor like business, is victory, not lengthy campaigns, because sustained conflict just drains resources, drains morale. And a key strategy he mentions is using the conquered foe to augment one's own strength, rather than simply destroying them.
Incorporate their assets.
That's exactly. It's pragmatic resource management. Take over their strengths, their resources, their people, if possible.
And his distinction between Shang and CHI seems fundamental to understanding how to confuse an enemy and achieve that rapid victory. We should probably slow down and really define those two ideas.
Definitely. Chang is the direct approach. It's the normal, the straightforward, the action that faces the enemy head on. It's what the enemy expects you to do.
Okay.
CHI, on the other hand, is the indirect, the abnormal, the surprise maneuver. It's the unexpected.
So it's just about trickery.
Not just simple trickery. The genius, Sun Tzu says, lies in their seamless interchangeability. How you use them together to confuse the opponent. You need to execute an attack that makes the enemy think your straightforward move, CH, is actually secretly designed, CHI, and make them think your surprise move, CHI, is just the obvious thing, CH.
Okay. Keep them guessing.
Precisely. It's about blurring the line between expectation and reality, so the enemy can never truly fathom your real intent or where the next blow will actually land. Maximum confusion.
And the classic anecdote here is Chow. She's artifice of deviation. It demonstrates winning through, well, knowing the artifice, the deception.
Right. Chow sheathed expectation against his enemy brilliantly. He publicly fortified his position for, 28 days? Made a big show of settling in, broadcasting his intention to wait it out.
Led the enemy to relax their guard.
Exactly. Once that expectation was firmly set, he executed a sudden forced march, arrived at the battlefield with astonishing speed, completely surprising the opponent. He defeated them before they could even mount a cohesive defense. His strategy won not through superior force, but through superior timing and psychological deception, playing on predictability.
This blend of strategy and timing, it's also visible in modern business survival, isn't it? Specifically in that paradox highlighted by the Good to Great research, that the second or even third or fourth follower often prevails over the early trailblazer.
Yeah, that pattern shows up again and again, especially in technology and market changes. Pioneers, the first ones out there, they face tremendous risks. They make costly errors. They often fail to achieve the scale or the reliability needed for long-term viability. The second follower, or the third, benefits immensely. They get to observe the trailblazer's mistakes, wait for the technology to mature a bit, and then perfect the product, focusing on reliability, cost, scale.
Can you give an example?
Sure, think of Boeing prevailing over de Havilland's Comet jetliner. De Havilland was first, revolutionary, but Boeing focused relentlessly on making the safest, most reliable jets. They won in the long run.
Right.
Or Dell and Sony eventually dominating portable computing over early innovators like Osborne. Success isn't just about being first. Often it's about being the most reliable, the most scalable, the most enduring. Hashtag B, creating a culture of creativity and accountability. Pixar and OKRs.
So when we look at enduringly successful creative organizations like Pixar, their effectiveness seems to rely almost entirely on a carefully cultivated culture,
Yeah.
built on trust and principles, almost like a modern version of Aristotle's best constitution, but for creativity.
That's a great way to think about it. Pixar, especially in the wake of Toy Story, developed these two defining creative principles. First, story is king, meaning absolutely nothing, not the cool new technology, not how easy it is to produce something, not merchandising tie-ins. Nothing gets in the way of the narrative truth, the quality of the story.
Story above all else.
Above all else. And second, trust the process, which basically means trusting their people to solve the incredibly difficult problems that arise in complex creative endeavors. This faith in the team is what fosters risk-taking and innovation.
And speaking of limits, Pixar actually illustrates that constraints, when applied wisely, can foster creativity, which kind of runs counter to the typical organizational instinct, right? Which is often just to throw more money or people at a problem.
Absolutely counterintuitive, but true. Brad Bird's producer, John Walker, developed this system for The Incredibles. They called it the popsicle stick system.
Popsicle sticks.
Literally. Each stick represented a person week of animation resource. By visually linking the budget directly to the creative choices, like, okay, using 5 sticks on Elastigirl stretching means 5 fewer sticks available for Jack's scene, the team was forced to budget creatively. They had to innovate within strict parameters. They had to constantly ask, where do we really need to spend the time and resources for maximum impact? Excellent focused work can emerge when managers provide sharp, clear, positive limits. Not arbitrary ones, but meaningful ones.
Conversely, we also saw the danger of management that fails to get buy-in, even when the technology or idea is objectively superior. Like those Lucasfilm editors who resisted the new computer video editing system.
Yeah, that's a classic case study. The editors preferred their old, comfortable tools, razor blades, paste film snippets by hand, because the new system, even though ultimately better, meant short-term slowdown. It meant learning something new, a loss of familiar control. The managers had a brilliant idea, backed by George Lucas himself. But because the people who actually had to use the system resisted the short-term pain and felt excluded from the decision, progress stalled. It shows that managers have to engender enthusiastic support. They need to mitigate the pain of change, bring people along. You can't just assume brilliant ideas will sell themselves. People matter.
And when leadership tries to implement controls based on fear rather than trust, the whole system can completely break down. The example given is the catastrophic failure of that Disney animation oversight group.
Oh, that sounds like a nightmare. That group's micromanagement, nitpicking every tiny decision, second-guessing artists that apparently created political wars, destroyed morale, it institutionalized fear.
Fear of making mistakes.
Exactly. And that kind of culture prioritizes error prevention, basically, avoiding blame over genuine problem-solving and risk-taking. The perfect example given is the 6-month projection they made to re-rig the character Rhino for a film. It was seen as this impossible, arduous task needing massive resources.
Why?
Because institutional fear promotes inaction and inflated estimates. In the end, 3 individuals, feeling empowered after the oversight group was dismantled, apparently solved the problem over a single weekend.
Wow, what a difference.
Huge difference. Eliminating that layer of fearful oversight restored flexibility, trust, and common sense. Sometimes the most effective move is removing the perceived guardrails that are actually roadblocks.
So, to maintain a healthy culture, one that avoids both micromanagement and chaos, you need radical clarity. Which brings us to a very modern accountability system. OKRs, objectives, and key results.
Right. OKRs address that fundamental need for structure and clarity. But perhaps surprisingly, done well, they actually foster psychological safety and dependability.
How so?
Well, the transparency of OKRs means everyone knows what the team's objective is, and crucially, who is responsible for which measurable key result contributing to that objective.
Okay.
This creates a kind of social contract. Teams take collective responsibility for achieving the overall objective, but individuals are transparently responsible for delivering specific key results. This alignment drives peak performance because everyone sees exactly how their work contributes to the bigger mission, and it creates dependability. You know, if your colleague hits their key result, your objective is also more secure. This system reduces fear and ambiguity, which are just massive drags on any organization. ##C. Leading with dexterity, the dichotomy of leadership.
This leads us to a final synthesis of leadership, which seems to require holding conflicting ideas in perfect balance. What the Navy SEALs in the source material call the dichotomy of leadership. The model of extreme ownership paired with decentralized command feels like a perfect, modern application of ancient strategic wisdom.
It really does. Extreme ownership dictates that the senior leader is responsible for absolutely everything that happens in their world. No excuses, no blaming others. The buck stops here.
Right. Total responsibility.
And here's the dichotomy: that same leader must simultaneously employ decentralized command. They have to push decision-making authority down the chain to subordinates, give them control. This is vital in dynamic, complex environments like the urban combat described in Ramadi. It frees the senior leader to step back, maintain perspective, focus on the bigger picture.
So they don't get bogged down in the weeds.
Exactly. They avoid catastrophic results by not being engulfed in the tactical decisions of every single subordinate unit. The junior leaders are given the freedom and the mandate to act decisively within their sphere, while the senior leader maintains ultimate responsibility for the overall outcome. It's a tough balance.
And the leader's own demeanor is also presented as a study in dichotomy. They have nothing to prove, but simultaneously everything to prove. How does that work?
Well, they have nothing to prove in the sense that their rank, their title, their position already establishes who is technically in charge.
Yeah.
Trying to constantly micromanage or loudly assert authority just to reinforce that position, that usually shows poor, inexperienced leadership, lack of confidence. However, they have everything to prove because they must earn the team's genuine trust and confidence every single day. Through their actions, their sound judgment, taking calculated risks when necessary, and demonstrating a deep, unwavering commitment to the team's long-term interests and well-being. True confidence from the team doesn't come from the leader's position on the org chart. It comes from their consistent competence and demonstrated care.
Finally, we circle back to the interpersonal relationships that underpin every negotiation, every partnership, with a crucial concept from Covey: win-win or no deal.
Yes, this is presented as the ultimate protector of long-term integrity and relationship health. It links directly back to Cicero's principles, really. Covey presents win-win or no deal as an even higher expression of the basic win-win principle. It means if, after rigorous effort, you simply cannot find a synergistic solution that truly benefits both parties, that meets both their core needs,
Then what?
then you agree to disagree agreeably. No deal is made. You walk away cleanly.
That sounds hard to do sometimes.
It can be, but this option is critical because it liberates individuals from feeling manipulated or pressured or forced into a suboptimal outcome just to get a deal done. It ensures that relationships and agreements are built only on genuinely shared values and mutually beneficial goals. It protects both parties from that long-term disillusionment and resentment that comes from sacrificing integrity for some temporary gain. It keeps the relationship healthy for the future, even if this particular deal doesn't happen.
Wow. What a sweep of knowledge we've covered. We've traveled from the internal self-mastery of the Goswami and Cicero's lofty mind, through the brutal pragmatism of Machiavelli and the strategic dexterity of Sun Tzu, all the way to modern decentralized command structures and OKRs. The core challenge, it seems, in every single era is finding that balance between personal virtue, internal integrity, and the messy external realities of power and getting things done.
I think that's right. What the sources ultimately reveal when you synthesize them like this is that enduring effectiveness, whether we're talking about a person, a government, a corporation, it's fundamentally based on confronting uncomfortable realities. That includes confronting our own inner emotional instincts, the ones that favor fight or flight. It includes acknowledging the positive necessity of limits sometimes on creative resources like those popsicle sticks.
Right.
And it certainly includes maintaining true integrity, even when expediency whispers tempting shortcuts. Cicero versus Moses, right. Integrity, it turns out, across all these sources is presented as the ultimate, the only truly sustainable expedience.
And the path forward, as those creative organizations like Pixar highlighted, requires confidence. But it's not the confidence that you know exactly what's coming.
No, not at all.
It's a confidence that, together, we will figure it out. That willingness to invent the future, as Alan Kay put it, it relies on that sturdy foundation of self-mastery and structural trust.
Which brings us right back around to Aristotle, doesn't it? We started by noting his point that unqualified virtue is only realized in the best constitution. So, The provocative thought for you, the listener, might be this. Considering how deeply our contemporary behaviors and paradigms are conditioned by the structures we operate in our modern interdependence, these transparent systems like OKRs, decentralized command, what is the best constitution of the modern workplace or modern society? And how must we change our own internal virtues, our own character, to meet its ethical and its practical demands? We really have to reflect on that tension between, say, Emersonian self-reliance and the complex structures we are increasingly forced to cooperate within. How do those two things coexist?
That is a perfect thought to end on. You have to invent yourself, perhaps, before you can truly help invent the future. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive.